Imagine this, an entire Roman legion, thousands of soldiers, hardened by war, marching proudly under their eagle standard, and then gone. No battle records. No survivors. Just silence. The Ninth Legion, Rome's most famous vanished army, has fueled legends for centuries. But here's the twist. The Ninth wasn't the only one. Buried in forgotten scrolls is the story of another Roman legion that disappeared without a trace, a legion so mysterious, Rome may have tried to erase it from history itself. Who were they? And why did their story vanish into the shadows? The Ninth may be the legend, but this other lost legion? Their fate could be even more shocking. Rome's legions were more than armies, they were the very backbone of the empire. Each legion was a finely tuned war machine, a force of nearly 5,000 men, drilled to fight in perfect unison. To enemies, they were the unstoppable thunder of discipline and steel. To Rome, they were the symbol of order, loyalty, and power stretched across 3 continents. Without the legions, there was no empire. But not all legions were equal. Each had its own number, its own battle honors, and above all, its own eagle. The Aquila, the golden eagle standard, wasn't just a piece of metal. It was the soul of the legion. Carried into battle, raised above the chaos, it reminded every soldier that they fought not for themselves, but for Rome itself. To lose the eagle was to lose your honor. To lose the legion entirely? That was unthinkable. Because here's the truth, Rome didn't forgive failure. Generals who botched campaigns faced disgrace, exile, or even suicide. And when a legion was wiped out, the stain was permanent. It wasn't just men who were lost. It was pride, reputation, and the image of Rome's invincibility. That's why Rome went to great lengths to hide, explain away, or even erase the memory of such disasters. A missing legion wasn't just a tragedy. It was a humiliation. And humiliation was rare, but not impossible. Rome's enemies did not always bow to its might. Hannibal shattered legions at Cannae. Germanic tribes crushed them in the dark Teutoburg forest. Parthian horse archers annihilated them in the sands of Carrhae. These defeats scarred Rome's psyche. Yet even in those cases, the empire remembered the names of the fallen. They were martyrs to Roman glory. But what happens when a legion disappears, not in battle, not in conquest, but from the pages of history itself? When no one writes about its final stand, when its eagle is never recovered, when its name simply fades from rolls. That is something different. That is not just defeat, that is erasure. And that's where the mystery begins. Because Rome, the most meticulous record keepers of the ancient world, suddenly went silent about one of its legions. No battles, no return, no graves, just absence. And absence in history is the loudest sound of all. The story of Rome's vanished legion doesn't begin in some faraway frontier of Europe. It begins in the sands of Egypt, the empire's jewel of the East, its breadbasket, and one of its most fiercely guarded provinces. And it was here that Legio XXII Deiotariana was stationed. This legion wasn't just another cog in Rome's machine. It had an unusual origin story. Its roots stretched back to a Galatian king named Deiotarius, a Celtic ruler in Asia Minor who had once raised troops to serve alongside Julius Caesar himself. When Rome absorbed his kingdom, his soldiers were folded into the legions, eventually becoming the 22nd Legion, forever carrying the name Deiotariana as a reminder of their foreign beginnings. A legion with a strange birth and an even stranger death. For decades, the 22nd Legion was stationed in Egypt. Its job was clear: protect the Nile, guard Alexandria, and ensure the grain shipments that fed the empire kept flowing to Rome. This wasn't glamorous work like Caesar's conquests in Gaul or Trajan's campaigns in Dacia, but it was essential. Whoever held Egypt held the empire's stomach. And so the 22nd was trusted with one of the most vital posts in Rome's world. Yet the Deiotariana didn't spend all its time in garrisons. Records show it fought in campaigns abroad. The legion marched into Judea during the brutal revolts of the 1st and 2nd centuries, when Jewish rebels rose against Roman rule. They may have even stood beside Titus during the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE, when the Second Temple was destroyed in a fire that lit the skies. Here, the 22nd carved its name into Roman military history, bloodied, hardened, but undefeated. And then silence. The last firm evidence we have of Legio XXII Deiotariana comes from the early 2nd century, during the reign of Emperor Hadrian. In papyri and inscriptions, we see them stationed in Egypt, still serving Rome. And then suddenly their name is gone. No battle report, no triumph, no disgrace. just a missing line in the meticulous Roman rolls. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, less than a generation later, the 22nd isn't listed among the legions anymore. It had simply ceased to exist. Historians have wrestled with this vanishing act for centuries. Some suggest the legion was annihilated in one of the Jewish uprisings, perhaps during the Kitos War 115 to 117 CE, a bloody and widespread revolt that shook Egypt, Cyrene, and Judea simultaneously. Could the 22nd have been caught in the chaos, massacred far from the eyes of Rome, its eagle lost in the sands? Others whisper that it may have perished against the rising power of the Parthians in the east, or been quietly dissolved after suffering humiliating losses that Rome preferred to erase from memory. The empire did that sometimes, burying its failures so deep they became shadows instead of scars. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. The Deiotariana's disappearance is unlike most legionary deaths. When legions fell, Rome remembered them, if only as a warning. But for the 22nd, Rome chose silence. And silence, as every historian knows, is the loudest mystery of all. Because here's the question. How does a legion that once guarded the empire's most vital province, fought in one of its bloodiest wars, and stood as a symbol of Rome's unbroken chain of power, simply vanish without a trace? When a legion disappears, Rome usually leaves us clues, broken monuments, bitter reports, sometimes even coins commemorating their revenge. But for Legio XXII Deiotariana, the silence is deafening. That silence has fueled centuries of speculation. What could have erased a Roman legion so completely? Theory 1. Crushed in Judea. The first theory takes us to the deserts and hills of Judea during the Bar Kokhba Revolt 132 to 136 CE. This wasn't just another provincial uprising. It was one of the deadliest wars Rome ever fought. Led by Simon Bar Kokhba, Jewish rebels carved out a short-lived state, defying the empire with ferocious resistance. Rome poured its might into crushing the revolt, but the cost was staggering. Entire towns were destroyed. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed. Historians like Cassius Dio describe Judea left deserted of all life. Could the 22nd Deiotariana have been among the legions sent into that furnace of war? If so, it may have been obliterated, cut down in ambushes, its standards captured, its men scattered in the caves and valleys of Judea. Yet, strangely, no Roman record names the 22nd in the campaign. Was their destruction so humiliating that Rome simply erased it from the history books? For an empire obsessed with prestige, that silence is almost an admission. 8. Theory 2. Ambushed in Arabia or Parthia. Another theory shifts the battlefield eastward, to the deserts of Arabia or the plains of Parthia. Rome's wars with the Parthian Empire were brutal, long, and often inconclusive. Here, legions could be swallowed whole in sudden defeats, like Crassus's catastrophic loss at Carrhae. Some scholars suggest the Deiotariana may have been deployed in one of these eastern wars, only to be overwhelmed far from home. Imagine a Roman column stretched thin across desert sands, ambushed by horse archers, its eagle seized in the chaos. The silence afterward, perhaps political convenience. Rome, embarrassed by yet another eastern disaster, may have struck the legion's name from official rolls rather than admit its shame. If this theory is true, the 22nd's bones may lie not in Egypt or Judea, but in some unmarked battlefield beyond the Euphrates, lost to shifting sands and forgotten chronicles. Theory 3. Natural disaster. But not every army is destroyed by sword or spear. Some vanish in quieter, deadlier ways. Another theory suggests the Deiotariana may have fallen victim to plague or natural disaster. In the tightly packed camps of Roman legions, disease could spread like wildfire. A single outbreak could cripple an entire army. Could the 22nd have been wiped out not by enemy blades, but by fever and pestilence? If stationed in Egypt, famine or Nile floods might also have played a role. Yet this explanation raises its own mystery. If disease ended them, why erase the legion completely? Why not recruit fresh men under the same banner as Rome often did? Unless, perhaps, the disaster was seen as a divine curse, a shame so great that even the legion's name had to be purged. Theory 4. Political purge. The most sinister theory of all is that the legion wasn't destroyed all. It was deliberately erased. Rome was ruthless with disgrace. If a legion mutinied, betrayed its commander, or backed the wrong emperor in a civil war, its punishment could be swift and absolute. Standards burned. Names struck from lists. History rewritten. Could the 22nd Deiotariana have committed such a crime? Perhaps siding with a failed usurper, or faltering in a campaign that Rome wished to bury. We may never know. But if this theory is true, then the legion's disappearance wasn't an accident of history, it was an execution. A killing not of men, but of memory. Each of these theories offers a glimpse into what might have happened. Crushed in Judea, lost in Parthia, erased by plague, or damned by politics. And yet, none can be proven. That uncertainty is what makes the Deiotariana's fate one of history's most tantalizing puzzles. Because when Rome chose silence, it left behind not just a missing legion, but an echo that still haunts the past. The Romans built their empire on the discipline of the legions. These weren't just soldiers, they were the backbone of Roman identity, the iron core of its dominance. To lose a legion wasn't just a military setback, it was a cultural earthquake. Every legion carried the Aquila, the eagle's standard. To the men, it was more than a symbol, it was the very soul of the legion. Losing it was a shame so unbearable that soldiers would risk their lives to rescue it from the battlefield. So imagine not just losing the eagle, but the entire legion vanishing from the record. That wasn't just defeat, it was humiliation on an imperial scale. When Legio XXII Deiotariana disappeared, Rome responded not with commemoration, not with vengeance, but with silence. Erasing its name from the rolls was an act of Damnatio Memoriae, a condemnation of memory. Rome treated its own legion as if it had never existed. That erasure was powerful, almost ritualistic. By striking the legion from history, Rome tried to strike the shame from itself. But history doesn't forget so easily. The disappearance of the 22nd sits uncomfortably beside the more famous mystery of the 9th Legion Hispana, which vanished from Britain sometime in the 2nd century. 2 legions, gone without explanation, their fates lost to speculation. These weren't isolated cases, they revealed cracks in the empire's armor. Rome loved to project itself as eternal, invincible, ordained by the gods. Yet these vanished legions tell another story, a story of limits, of overreach, of an empire that could lose not just battles but entire armies. For all its marble monuments and triumphal arches, Rome was still vulnerable to revolt, to ambush, to disease, to its own political games. And that's why the silence matters. Because in trying to bury the truth, Rome accidentally exposed it, that even the mightiest empire the world had ever seen could be humbled, and its memory scarred by the disappearance of a single legion. The mystery of the 22nd isn't just about one lost unit. It's about the fragility of power. It's about the difference between how empires want to be remembered and the truths they desperately hope we'll forget. Even today, nearly 2,000 years later, the fate of 22nd Deiotariana is a battlefield of ideas. Modern historians argue over scraps of evidence, a missing inscription here, a broken reference there. Some claim the legion was annihilated in Judea during the Bar Kokhba Revolt. Others say it vanished in Arabia, or perhaps was wiped out in a disaster, so embarrassing the empire chose silence over truth. Archaeologists sift through ruins in Egypt, Judea, and beyond, hoping for a forgotten tombstone, a buried inscription, a soldier's name etched in stone that could rewrite history. Amateur sleuths pore over the fragments too, spinning theories of cover-ups, hidden defeats, or even conspiracies buried under Roman propaganda. The mystery is alive not just in academia, but in the imagination of anyone drawn to the silence of history. And maybe that's why it endures. Because in all the monuments Rome left us, the Colosseum, the aqueducts, the triumphal arches, there's a conspicuous absence. A silence where the records of an entire legion should be. The deliberate gaps in the Roman archives tell us as much about the empire as the stories they preserved. Rome projected itself as invincible, eternal, chosen by the gods. But propaganda always leaves shadows. And in those shadows lie the stories Rome didn't want told, stories like that of the 22nd Legion. The fact that we still don't know their fate is a reminder of something deeper. Even the greatest empires cannot control how history remembers them. The legacy of the Lost Legion is not just in what we know, but in what we don't. It forces us to confront the limits of history itself, that some truths are buried, not because they were never there, but because someone wanted them forgotten. And so the 22nd lives on, not in triumph, not in glory, but in mystery, a shadow cast across the centuries, daring us to keep searching. 2 legions, 2 disappearances, 2 gaping holes in the story of Rome. The 9th Legion may have captured the world's imagination, but the silence of the 22nd cuts even deeper. It's not just a legion that's missing. It's an entire chapter of Rome's history, swallowed by time, by secrecy, or perhaps by shame. Picture it. Thousands of Roman soldiers, their eagle standard gleaming in the desert sun, marching into the unknown and never returning. No graves, no records, no final words. Just silence. A silence so heavy it echoes louder than their victories. And maybe, just maybe, beneath the sands of Egypt or in the ruins of Judea, the truth still waits. A broken inscription. A forgotten tomb. A clue that could finally end 2 millennia of speculation. Until then, the 22nd stands as Rome's most haunting mystery. So I'll leave you with this. What do you think happened to Rome's other lost legion? Were they slaughtered in revolt? Crushed in battle? Or erased by the empire itself? Drop your theory in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you want more mysteries of history, hit subscribe and step with us into the shadows of the forgotten realms. Because sometimes the greatest stories are the ones Rome tried to erase.